Now, have you heard of Forest City? This was a $100 billion project unveiled in southern Malaysia in 2016 by the developer Country Garden.
A $100 billion city built from scratch, meant to be a futuristic paradise. But instead of thriving streets and glowing skyscrapers, it's eerily silent, an empty shell of broken dreams. What was supposed to be an ultra-modern metropolis now stands as one of the most haunting real estate failures in history. Towering skyscrapers with no residents, luxurious malls with no shoppers, a grand vision that has crumbled into a deserted ghost town. But how did this happen? How did a project backed by one of China's biggest developers, hyped as the next Dubai of Asia, fall into ruin so quickly? A single mistake, a string of bad luck, or something much bigger? This is Forest City, a billion-dollar gamble that went terribly wrong. And its shocking story is far from over. Buckle up, because this is a mystery you won't believe. The grand vision of Forest City. Forest City was conceived as a cutting-edge metropolis, designed to be a futuristic urban paradise in Malaysia's southern waters. Launched in 2014 by China's largest property developer, Country Garden Holdings, the project was meant to be a shining example of China's Belt and Road Initiative, a global infrastructure strategy aimed at connecting China with the world. The developers envisioned a modern, eco-friendly city built on 4 artificial islands spanning 30 square kilometers, a space nearly twice the size of Los Angeles International Airport. The goal was to attract 1 million residents from around the globe, positioning Malaysia as a major hub in Southeast Asia, much like Dubai serves as a gateway to the Middle East. To bring this vision to life, Country Garden Holdings planned a city filled with luxury skyscrapers, high-end shopping districts, and state-of-the-art amenities. The development was designed to include elite international schools, high-tech surveillance systems, and a seamless transportation network to create a safe and convenient urban experience. The city's landscape would feature vertical green spaces, waterways, and golf courses, branding it as an eco-friendly, technologically advanced smart city. In theory, it would be a dream destination for wealthy investors, expatriates, and digital nomads looking for a modern, secure, and green urban retreat. However, notwithstanding its futuristic idea, Forest City was priced beyond the reach of most Malaysians. In 2017, apartments in the city went for a start price of $170,000, close to 3 times the average housing price in Johor, the state in Malaysia where it was being built. This immediately indicated that the development was not meant for local buyers, but rather for wealthy foreign investors, specifically from China. Aggressive marketing campaigns focusing on Chinese buyers brought thousands of them to fly in and buy pre-sale units even before the construction of the apartments had begun. The idea was that these international investors would either occupy the place, use their property as a second home for themselves, or rent it out in order to make an income and inject life into the city economy. With its grand ambitions and deep pockets, Forest City was to become among the costliest and most technologically sophisticated urban developments anywhere in the world. Yet, while at the heart of the very concept revolutionary, the implementation of the project faced overwhelming odds from environmental issues to government politics, financial bungling, and changes in the global economy. What was initially a vision for a vibrant international metropolis began a rapid descent into the annals of modern history as one of the most infamous ghost cities. But turning this ambitious vision into reality was another story, because while the dream was grand, the execution was anything but smooth. The ambitious construction plan. From the start, Forest City was envisioned as a futuristic, self-sustaining urban hub, built on 4 massive artificial islands off the coast of Johor, Malaysia. The city was designed to feature luxury high-rises, elite schools, high-end shopping districts, and world-class hotels. The development aimed to blend modern architecture with eco-friendly designs, promoting a sustainable and technologically advanced lifestyle. To enhance security and exclusivity, the city was planned to have constant surveillance through drones and security patrols, ensuring a safe, controlled environment for its residents. A key selling point of the project was its green and smart city features, which included vertical gardens on skyscrapers, water recycling systems, and prefabricated construction methods to reduce waste and environmental impact. The islands were also meant to have extensive waterways, golf courses, and lush green spaces, creating a balance between urban luxury and nature. By marketing Forest City as an eco-friendly metropolis, Country Garden Holdings hoped to attract wealthy investors and expatriates looking for a sustainable, high-tech living environment. However, despite its promise of environmental consciousness, the project was soon criticized for land reclamation activities that destroyed local marine ecosystems, particularly seagrass beds and mangrove forests in the Straits of Johor. Out of the 4 islands planned for construction, work started on just 1, and even that is far from completion. Country Garden Holdings initially announced the development of 700,000 residential units, of which only 26,000 apartments had been built by 2023. Even if we believe the company that it sold 80% of the completed units, the actual number of residents living in Forest City is shockingly low, with an occupancy level of less than 1% of what could have been. The infrastructure development was postponed completely, and thus the city lacked the essential services, businesses, and public transport to sustain life. Hence, it had an abandoned and haunted vibe. To add to the woes of the construction, the only road linking Forest City to the mainland collapsed after a sinkhole in 2023, stranding workers on the island for days. With the construction repetitive delays, project management crises were caused by regulatory delays, financial impediments, and a lack of investors. It was originally intended to finish the city by the mid-2030s. However, due to lack of funding and the continuing economic quandary, serious questions have emerged as to whether Forest City will ever be completed. Once marketed as a high-tech paradise, it now stands as an icon of overambition and misplanning, leaving its future dangling in uncertainty. Why Forest City became a ghost town? Despite its grand vision, Forest City quickly turned into a ghost town, with only 15% of the development completed and an occupancy rate of less than 1%. The once promising mega project, meant to house 1 million residents, now stands eerily deserted, with abandoned shopping malls, vacant apartment buildings, and a lifeless beachfront plagued by crocodile warnings. Of the 4 planned artificial islands, only 1 even began construction, and even that remains unfinished. The city, once expected to become a thriving international hub, has instead become a symbol of China's failing overseas real estate investments. One of the biggest reasons for Forest City's failure was its unrealistic pricing and market miscalculation. With expensive apartment prices, Forest City was far too unaffordable for the average Malaysian at the time. Instead of targeting local buyers, Country Garden Holdings marketed the project heavily to wealthy Chinese investors, offering them an opportunity to secure properties abroad as secondary homes. However, in 2017, the Chinese government imposed strict capital controls, limiting the amount of money its citizens could transfer overseas to $50,000 per year, making it impossible for many buyers to afford Forest City properties. This project was doomed politically in Malaysia. In 2018, the Malaysian government restricted the issuance of visas to mainland Chinese buyers even further, deterring investors who were already cautious. The Forest City sales were by then painfully slumping during the pandemic strike in March 2020, when the entire real estate market was virtually frozen in Malaysia. Due to the international restrictions imposed on travel for the COVID-19 pandemic, Chinese investors were barred from visiting or buying property. and thus, with the absence of sufficient new buyers to prop up the economy of the project, the financial backbone of the project collapsed. The further weakening of the project occurred during this time due to the global economic slowdown and the Chinese real estate market crash, which saw Country Garden Holdings unable to meet its debt obligations, further collapsing the financing for the project. Forest City today presents a showcase of empty high-rises, shuttered shops, and unfinished construction sites, now devoid of any human activity. Rather, the much-visited duty-free shop for cigarettes and liquor is the only source of life in the area. In this case, tourists come to shop, not to stay. After sunset, the town goes dark and lifeless, with half a dozen lights on in hundreds of empty buildings. What was once envisioned as a luxury metropolis has instead become one of the largest failed real estate projects in the world, a pungent reminder of how overambition, financial miscalculations, and political missteps can drown even the most extravagant of developments. China's build first, populate later strategy, Forest City, was built on China's infamous real estate development strategy, often described as a build it and they will come approach. This strategy assumes that if large-scale developments are constructed, people will naturally move in over time, turning empty cities into thriving urban hubs. It worked in some parts of China during the country's rapid economic growth, but it also led to the creation of numerous ghost cities where supply far outstripped demand. Country Garden Holdings applied this same philosophy to Forest City, banking on the idea that foreign investors and expatriates would flood in simply because the infrastructure was there. Unfortunately, this assumption proved catastrophically wrong. Unlike in China, where government policies could steer urban migration, Forest City was built in a foreign country without a guaranteed influx of residents. The project was launched at the height of China's property boom, when developers had easy access to credit and an almost endless flow of investment money. However, this speculative model started collapsing as China's real estate sector faced increasing financial pressure. Developers like Country Garden Holdings assumed that buyers would continue snapping up apartments before they were even built. But demand dried up once China restricted overseas capital outflows in 2017, making it difficult for citizens to move large sums of money abroad. Without a steady flow of new buyers, Forest City was left with thousands of unsold and unoccupied apartments. Another major weakness in the entire context was the idea that luxurious real estate would attract a large, diverse population. It was, though, unlike other successful international cities like Dubai or Singapore, which had much better economic industries to lure migrations. Forest City was purely residential and did not clearly delineate any job opportunities. The plan depended almost solely on foreign property buyers and retirees, rather than creating a self-sustaining economy that would organically draw residents. Besides, poor accessibility made it an even less attractive one. Forest City is isolated from major urban centers, and only one road connecting it to mainland Malaysia collapsed, and the city could not fully tie in to the region's infrastructure. A clear example of bad planning by the Chinese government is how their steel-backed overconfidence in large-scale speculative project development led to one of modern history's most expensive real estate failures. Like Ordos and Tianjin, Eco-City in China, Forest City followed the same ghost city pattern. The place was built without verifying a demand in the end, before constructing widespread developments. The strategy assumed that investment alone would lead to a booming metropolis, but without local buyers, government backing, or a sustainable population base, the city remains largely empty. The flaws in the build it and they will come model are becoming painfully clear as China's real estate market encounters more financial distress, and Forest City is a stark warning against overambitious, speculative urban planning. The price barrier. One of the biggest obstacles to Forest City's success was its high property prices, which made it unaffordable for the average Malaysian. When sales began in 2017, Apartments were priced at $170,000, while the average house price in Johor was just under $60,000 at that time. This meant that the local middle class, the people who would have most naturally lived in Forest City, could not afford to buy homes there. Instead of catering to domestic buyers, Country Garden Holdings deliberately marketed the city to wealthy foreign investors, particularly from mainland China, with the expectation that they would purchase properties as second homes or rental investments. Initially, this strategy seemed to work, as thousands of Chinese buyers rushed to invest in pre-sale units before construction was even completed. By 2017, 75% of the 20,000 apartments planned for the next 3 years had already been sold, with only 10% of buyers coming from Malaysia or neighbouring Singapore. However, Forest City was never designed to be a primary residence for its buyers. Many Chinese investors saw it as a safe place to park their money rather than somewhere they would actually live. This meant that even though many apartments were technically sold, they remained empty, contributing to the ghost city effect. The financial model of the project collapsed in 2017 when the Chinese government imposed capital controls limiting citizens from transferring more than $50,000 outside of China per year. The Forest City apartments were much more expensive than the caps on a private transfer, and any potential buyer found his or her dream apartment unaffordable by the funding sourced. Since disinvestment from China dried up, sales quickly fell off, and Country Garden Holdings rushed to seek new customers. The developer made attempts at attracting Middle Eastern, Indonesian and Thai investors, yet demand did not return, and thousands of empty unsold units were left. As Forest City struggled, property values plummeted as much as 40% from original prices, with apartments going for bargain basement prices today. Some units still fetch as much as $5 million, but others now start at about $75,000, ostensibly huge losses to early investors. After such price reductions, however, the demand is still low, as the city still lacks the most basic infrastructure, economic opportunities, and functioning communities. Forest City was made for a market that never really existed, and that, without a population to support it, probably makes it one of the most expensive failures in real estate history. Just as Forest City struggled to find buyers, a wave of political decisions and global events would push the project even deeper into uncertainty. Impact of politics and global events. Forest City's downfall wasn't just due to poor planning and high prices. It was also deeply affected by political decisions and global events. When the project was launched in 2014, China was experiencing a real estate boom, and its wealthy citizens were eager to invest in overseas properties. However, by 2017, the Chinese government introduced strict capital controls, limiting individuals from transferring more than $50,000 abroad per year. This policy was intended to prevent excessive capital flight from China, but it also crippled Forest City's main buyer market, as most Chinese investors suddenly couldn't afford to pay for their properties. Sales plummeted almost overnight, and thousands of potential deals fell apart, leaving Country Garden Holdings struggling to find new investors. At the same time, Malaysia's shifting political landscape also played a role in the project's decline. In 2018, the Malaysian government, under new leadership, introduced stricter visa regulations for foreign buyers, particularly those from China. This move, combined with China's capital restrictions, made it significantly harder for Chinese citizens to purchase property in Forest City or even move there. The uncertainty surrounding Malaysia's political stance on foreign investments discouraged many buyers who had already been hesitant about the project. As a result, Forest City became increasingly isolated, with fewer new residents moving in and many apartments remaining unoccupied despite being sold. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 gave a huge blow to the already troubled project, just when everything seemed to be going downhill. The international travel ban and strict lockdowns completely halted visits or purchases of property by foreign investors, stopping new sales altogether. People who had already purchased apartments couldn't even move in or take care of their properties, adding to the ghost town status of Forest City. The slowdown of the economy caused by the pandemic triggered a falling real estate market across the globe. Demand for luxury international property fell, so developers like Country Garden Holdings found themselves in a deep crisis. In 2021, with the deterioration of the crisis in China's real estate sector, Forest City now has received more uncertainty because Country Garden Holdings has defaulted on its mammoth debts. Once China's largest private property developer now struggling to evade bankruptcy, its chances of Forest City being ever completed to its original intentions grew markedly thin. With the project providing a fine case study of how external forces can raise even the most ambitious of developments, the stars beelined for Forest City. It was marred by political restrictions, then hit by a global pandemic, and wham, financial instability. With the project now in troubled financial waters, its future is still very bleak. Environmental and infrastructure challenges. From the very beginning, Forest City faced significant environmental concerns due to its location and construction methods. The project required the creation of 4 artificial islands, which meant dumping massive amounts of sand into the sea to extend the shoreline. This process, known as land reclamation, caused severe damage to local marine ecosystems, particularly in the Straits of Johor region. Seagrass beds and mangrove forests, critical habitats for marine life, were devastated, leading to disruptions in fish stocks and biodiversity. Environmental activists and even neighbouring Singapore raised concerns over the project's long-term impact on the region's fragile ecosystem, prompting delays and stricter regulations before construction could fully continue. Beyond environmental damage, Forest City also suffered from major infrastructure issues, which made the city increasingly difficult to access. Despite being a multi-billion-dollar mega project, there was only one road linking Forest City to the mainland. This weak connectivity discouraged potential residents and investors, as the city felt isolated from major urban centres. The situation became worse in 2023, when a sinkhole caused the only connecting road to collapse, leaving maintenance workers stranded on the island for days. The incident highlighted the poor planning and lack of reliable infrastructure, reinforcing concerns about Forest City's livability and long-term sustainability. Poor accessibility coupled with protracted construction delays plagued the project right from the beginning, promising construction at a fast pace. As many as 3 islands had their development yet unfinished by 2023. Out of the 700,000 planned residential habitats, only 26,000 were built, and most of them remained unoccupied. Moreover, absentees were to live because of the lack of critical infrastructure, such as transportation systems, utilities, and commercial developments. Rather than becoming a self-sustaining city, Forest City became a gigantic, ever-continued construction site, with its deserted beaches, abandoned shopping malls, and half-built skyscrapers. Forest City was said to be an eco-city, but its real setbacks in the environment and infrastructure were contrary to this. All these factors would transform it to act like a ghost town, destroying natural habitats, poor planning in urban design, and lack of a real transport network. While several green initiatives were designed into the project's internal vertical gardens and water recycling systems, these green improvements will pale in significance to the shady environmental devastation caused during the land reclamation processes. Ultimately, Forest City's failure to solve the problems and issues with infrastructure and ecology will only aggravate its problems and make it harder to attract any potential new residents or investors. Financial troubles and Country Garden's collapse. Forest City's financial troubles were a direct result of Country Garden Holdings' overambitious expansion and the collapse of China's real estate market. When the project was first announced in 2014, China's property sector was booming, and developers had easy access to credit and funding. Country Garden Holdings, one of China's largest private real estate developers, poured billions into Forest City, expecting it to become a profitable international venture. However, by 2023, only 15% of the project had been completed and sales had plummeted due to lack of demand. The company had massively overestimated buyer interest, and as a result, it was left with thousands of unsold, unoccupied units and a failing multi-billion-dollar investment. The financial strain on Country Garden Holdings worsened as China's real estate bubble burst in 2021, leading the government to impose stricter borrowing limits on property developers. This made it significantly harder for companies like Country Garden Holdings to secure new funding to complete massive projects like Forest City. At the same time, Chinese home buyers, who were the primary target audience for Forest City, were now less willing or able to invest in expensive overseas properties due to China's economic slowdown and strict capital controls. As a result, cash flow dried up, and the company struggled to repay its debts, putting Forest City's future in jeopardy. By 2023, an indebtedness of nearly $200 billion was the condition into which Country Garden Holdings had defaulted, marking it as one of the most financially distressed developers in China. With lawsuits from creditors on its heels in Hong Kong and pressure exerted by its international investors, the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Forest City, once hailed as an exemplary project under China's Belt and Road-initiated vision, has turned out to be a monumental financial disaster. Although its area was slashed to half of the original, there were still no definitive constructors' timelines within which it might be completed. Despite these considerable financial upheavals, Country Garden Holdings has maintained that Forest City has not been equally completely abandoned. The company stated in an interview in October 2024 that reasonable development would continue according to market demand. However, it seems far from likely, given the company's financial crisis, ongoing legal problems, and worsening investor confidence. Forest City now serves as a grand warning as to the drawbacks of overexpansion, unsustainable development, and the pitfalls of speculation in the real estate market. Absent some major intervention, Forest City could enter the history books as the most expensive ghost city ever. Potential revival efforts. Despite its current ghost city status, efforts are still being made to revive Forest City and attract new residents and investors. One of the biggest changes has been a shift in the target market. Instead of relying solely on Chinese buyers, developers are now seeking investors from the Middle East, Indonesia, and Thailand. The goal is to diversify the city's demographics and reduce dependency on China's struggling real estate market. While this strategy may help bring in some new buyers, the challenge remains that Forest City is still an expensive and isolated development, making it difficult to convince people to move in. The Malaysian government has also taken a more active role in trying to save the project. Since Malaysia owns a 40% financial stake in Forest City, the government has introduced new policies to attract potential residents. These include multi-entry visas, a flat 15% income tax rate, and plans to create a financial zone within the city. These incentives are meant to make Forest City more attractive to business professionals and expatriates, similar to how Singapore and Dubai have used tax advantages to draw in foreign investors. However, it remains to be seen whether these measures will be enough to turn Forest City into a thriving metropolis. Revival infrastructure improvements are on the table. Prime among them is a high-speed rail connection between Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, along with a stop in Forest City. This railway will improve access dramatically and make development more appealing to commuters and businesses alike. Other local infrastructure improvements are underway to facilitate service repairs caused by previous construction delays, including better roads and enhanced public services. All these are, however, big-ticket items that require lots of investments, and with Country Garden Holdings having huge debt numbers, it is uncertain whether all this will manifest. The 50% downsized concept hasn't stopped Country Garden Holdings from declaring that Forest City may still go ahead in some form. Company officials remained adamant in an October 2024 interview that the original overall blueprint still stands and that the project will continue based on market demand. But with ongoing lawsuits, financial instability, and lack of immediate investor interest, the revival of Forest City faced severe doubts. Some pieces of the development could be salvaged with government incentives and infrastructure improvements, but it is highly improbable that Forest City will ever become the bustling futuristic metropolis that developers had imagined. Even with new strategies and government support, the big question remains: can Forest City truly rise from the ashes, or is it doomed to remain an unfinished dream? Will Forest City ever be completed? The future of Forest City remains highly uncertain as it faces financial, political, and logistical obstacles that have slowed its progress to a near halt. Originally planned for completion by the mid-2030s, the project has been significantly delayed, with only 15% of the development finished as of 2023. The lack of buyers, construction setbacks, and Country Garden Holdings' financial troubles have made it difficult to continue large-scale development. While the company claims that construction will continue based on demand, there is little indication that demand will increase anytime soon. Without a surge in investment or significant government intervention, the city may never reach its original vision. One of the biggest challenges is Country Garden Holdings' financial instability. With the company defaulting on nearly $200 billion in debt and facing multiple lawsuits, it is unclear whether it has the resources or credibility to complete Forest City as planned. If Country Garden Holdings goes bankrupt, the project could be abandoned entirely or left in limbo for years, as legal battles over ownership and unfinished properties unfold. Even if another developer steps in to take over the project, the massive costs of completing the city and fixing existing issues, such as poor infrastructure and lack of businesses, make it a risky investment. The Malaysian government could yet save the underdeveloped project as it holds a 40% stake in the development, along with tax reliefs, multi-entry visas, and plans to create a finance zone. But nothing seems to have worked. The proposed high-speed rail link from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur, which will stop at Forest City, could improve accessibility and attraction to the place, but this will take yet some time before the completion date becomes known. All these ideas show that Forest City has not been entirely abandoned, but there is no assurance of its success. Considering the real estate slump in China, the financial debacle of Country Garden Holdings, and the sluggish recovery of the world investment markets, it is hard to believe that Forest City will ever be finished. At best, it may become a much truncated version of what was initially envisaged, a smaller, more sustainable community rather than a humongous, futuristic megacity. At worst, it could be an eternal ghost town, serving as a glaring reminder of the risks associated with speculative real estate and overly ambitious mega projects. Unless there is a sweeping change in investor confidence and general economic conditions, Forest City is likely to remain one of the costliest real estate failures as of now. And that's the shocking story of China's $100 billion mega ghost city, a project that promised the future but ended up frozen in time. Will it ever rise, or will it remain one of the biggest real estate disasters in history? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. And if you're hungry for more jaw-dropping stories like this, check out the next video on your screen right now. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.